Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Supply Chain Talk. I'm Ana Maria Velica, and I'm your host today. Our episode is how goods movements insights can deliver competitive advantage. We have a beautiful topic, and I have thought leaders cross-Atlantic, and I will invite them shortly. Before I do that, I would like to thank you for attending, for dialing in, either on the Business Reporter website or directly on LinkedIn. Welcome to our Supply Chain Talk. As you know, the format, it's a live talk show, and you can interact in real life with my panelists. So please address questions, comments. My panelists will try to reply in real time. And as you know, the best comment compliment will be rewarded with a Supply Chain Talk mug, which will be couriered by my colleagues at Business Reporter. The first panelist, Kevin Johnson, I would like you to switch on your camera and mic on, Kevin.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for
Hello,
having me
Kevin.
today.
It's good to have you here. A few words about Kevin. He's the National Freight and Mobility Data Analytics lead. Kevin, over the past 7 years, has supported logistics providers in the Central Valley of California to help them access the long-term viability of their goods movements projects in terms of access for labor and freight movement using telematics-based mobility data. In his free time, Kevin loves to play soccer, go skiing, and travel around California with his wife and 2 dogs. Beautiful. My second panelist has been here before with us, Elisha Harman. Hello, Elisha.
Hello, how are you? Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you again. A few words about Elisha. She serves as Head of Solution Business Applications at Amazon Web Services, where she leverages over 15 years of experience leading digital transformation, technology, innovations, and strategic programs that drive customer satisfaction and competitive advantage across global enterprises. Elisha is based in Cincinnati. She serves as board president of FTZ 46 and 47 and vice president of the Cincy AI Catalyst Board, while also teaching as an adjunct professor at the University of Cincinnati and supporting community organizations. Impressive. My third guest is Nate V. Hello, Nate.
Hi, Anna. Good morning. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here on our show. A few words about Nate. Nate is Associate Vice President of Business Development Altitude by Geotab. Nate's professional life has been dedicated to the movement of goods. He's spent 12 years in freight technology and logistics, including time at DHL Express, and now he leads sales for Altitude by Geotab. Nate's personal passion is also rooted in supply chain, as he is the 5th generation California citrus farmer. This is great. So today we have a news item which was selected by our producer, and it's if you open the chat box, please, you can access the news item in real time. It was published by the World Economic Forum, and the title is Why Autonomous Orchestration is the Next Frontier in Supply Chain Management. A few highlights about the news item. Business leaders face mounting challenges as disruptions expose the fragility of global supply networks. And to thrive in this environment, enterprises must evolve from being reactive to proactive orchestration powered by AI. There is a very powerful statistic there. According to a 2024 IDC supply chain survey, advanced analytics and AI are the top technology investment priorities for supply chain leaders over the next 3 years. So This is a masterclass. Please take your notes. And I would like to invite you, Kevin. What's your take on the news item?
Yeah, I found the article extremely interesting and very much in line with the work that some of my clients have been asking me to help them with. As you mentioned in the introduction, I've been doing a lot of work in the Central Valley of California, really helping some large logistics developers with their projects and really ensuring that their logistics hubs are sustainable over the coming years. Obviously, we saw through COVID that there was a really big increase in demand. And now that we're getting back out of COVID and into that new normal, we're starting to see congestion patterns return. And so, really, the importance of infrastructure planning to ensure the viability of these sites is really important. And so, as Anna mentioned in my introduction, I'm strongly rooted in a analytics background. Actually, travel behavior modeling is really one of my key focuses, and just a lot of things that they said in the article really resonated with me. And I think probably the biggest one was that we really need to anticipate and mitigate these potential issues. And so here at RSG, we are deeply rooted in market research and travel behavior modeling and really integrating that into the planning process. And so the way we've approached this is we actually utilize mobility data, or big data as is often referred to, and in partnerships with companies like Geotab, where it's a telematics-based product, really helps us understand the needs of these types of facilities. And so we can really tap directly into what these trucks are doing and also really understand the labor side as well. And we can gather that information and we can actually integrate it into the planning process and our planning tools and utilize that to forecast what it's going to look like in the future, and then test a whole bunch of different infrastructure and other types of alternatives, TDM measures, et cetera, to really understand what mitigation measures are necessary to ensure the viability and sustainability of these sites moving into the future. And so for me, that was really one of the biggest takeaways. And the importance of having good quality data, which I saw in the article, was one of the, as it should be, one of the big concerns of the executives. And partnering with a company like Geotab has just been really great for helping us understand that and make sure that our tools are representative of what's actually going on in the environment.
Thank you, Kevin. I can see the passion already. Alicia, what's your take on the news item?
Yeah, I think this really is showing the experience that we're all having in the field, that most companies have been built on, a linear progression, even down to our contracts that are generally over multi-years. So quick changing is hard to do. And I think every company is reacting to what's happened over the last decade and understanding that linear is not what we need anymore. We need more resiliency. And so I think I've experienced what the article said, and I had three main takeaways. One, my work has been for the better part of the last, 15 years, the intersection of supply chain and IT. And I think the first thing is it's inevitable that AI and agents will change the face of how we work. And, for anybody that is working in IT, it's looking at the infrastructure underneath of that to ensure that we can utilize the power of technology. I think the second thing is the data foundation. You can't build a house on sand, I think is an adage. And that is true with data foundations, governance, real-time data pipelines, cross-functional team sharing is a huge restrictive factor right now that we're finding with companies. And then really just enabling the AI integration. And the last thing is really changing overall from a reactive mindset to a proactive. And for me, that's mostly from a change management perspective. And 40% of companies are already using agentic. So what does that mean for the workforce and going forward? Are they upskilling? Are they trained? And are they ready to support the company going forward?
Thank you, Alicia. I think the mindset is very important, and the leadership, proactive leadership, and rewarding proactive risk-taking decisions. What's your take on Nate?
Yeah, so I think it's a super exciting time to be part of the whole AI transformation, working for a company that has a huge focus not only internally but also kind of powering companies externally as well. So looking at the article there, one of the things I think Kevin kind of touched on as well is like the quality of the data. So there's a whole kind of saying garbage in, garbage out. And so definitely people want to do their due diligence and making sure that when they are looking to build these models, that the data that they're getting is actually quality and contextual, because it is going to be helping make a lot of these big decisions, especially when it comes to infrastructure, in real estate. Like those are multi-million-dollar types of investments. And so you want to be able to be sure that the data that you have is obviously very quality and has been validated and things of that nature. So I would say that obviously one thing within the article is that you can't make decisions on one data input alone. There has to be multiple data layers. And
Mhm.
so being able to source and find the right data partners in the ecosystem, whether that's economic, demographics, political, mobility insights, is going to be something that has to kind of all come together in order to make those times of insight decisions. Lastly, like there's just so much happening in the supply chain right now. Last year there was the Francis Scott Key Bridge that collapsed because of the container ship. We've had multiple natural disasters with like Helene, Milton, and all the fluctuations with tariffs. So being able to gather all of that and blend that together to get quick answers as opposed to reactive and doing that is where I see it going. But it is going to take a lot of time to get there. But once it's there, it's really going to help some of these supply chain executives and decision makers make those decisions quickly.
Thank you, Nate. And I think this is a talk show for supply chain leaders and specifically for logistics leaders, for distribution leaders, for supply planners. So I would like us now to go into the first topic, pinpointing underserved areas and emerging markets, turn pain points into valuable business opportunities. How do you do that, Kevin?
So I think that's a really important, concept. And, there's a lot of obviously underserved markets, in the United States. I've had the opportunity to really do a lot of freight planning across the nation. And, I think one thing that I really want to touch on is, the importance of that, the big picture interactive wheel chart that was off to the left side of the article. And in that chart, you could just see how many different aspects there are to this work. And not everyone touches on every one of those aspects. The ones that I've largely touched on are labor markets, infrastructure, resiliency, demographics, et cetera. And so touching on especially the demographics side, that's really important to understand where your demographics are, who's being served, where the needs are, and having good data to really help you understand that comes from a variety of sources and needs to be one of those layers that's talked about in the article. And then bringing in new technologies, AI, et cetera, to really help with the analytics behind that and then to feed that into proactiveness. So once again, basically getting good data, utilizing all your sources to identify a lot of those underserved markets and then to make decisions based off that data rather than just making it off of what you think or what you've done in the past. That there's so many layers these days, we have access to all this data, and really developing tools and utilizing some of these new technologies like AI to just really help understand everything. And once again, where are those markets and what are possible solutions to serve them?
Thank you, Kevin. And Alicia, I'm interested to know at Amazon, from your own experience, how do we use the power of data to understand areas of concerns in these emerging markets?
Yeah, so I am on the AWS side, so the web services side, but Amazon proper with Prime has been invested for a very long time in supply chain and understanding the logistics data that comes from underserved markets, right? Moving from 2-day Prime to 1-day Prime to same-day delivery, constantly looking at where the data is coming from, who's ordering, and what footprint where do we need micro hubs? So data is imperative, and I would say the data that we are looking at ourselves and our clients is, what's the real-time location data? So having that GPS, understanding where your delivery is, added customer value to knowing when the truck will reach your house, to avoid, missing the truck or, delays or anything like that. And that includes contextual data, the traffic patterns, capacity constraints, local laws, energy efficiency is a whole lot more than just where are the customers at. And then we're also looking at predictive analytics. So how can AI forecast delays, look at alternative routes, anticipate demands, seasonal spikes, and how that will happen before it gets to the entire network. So things like bridge collapsing, those really aren't predictive, but understanding and
Mhm.
having the power behind it to make calculations and different decisions should it happen of how to reroute is, imperative. And then lastly, that really harnessing the power of, automated orchestration. So enabling systems to self-correct. So if there is an exception in the system, the delivery is taking longer than expected, what is the next best action? And using, agents to orchestrate that on your behalf.
Thank you, Alicia. A lot of goodness in your answer. I like to call it a master class, so please take notes. Nate, from your experience, how do you support the emerging markets with the power of analytics and predictive analytics?
Yeah, great question. So I could give a couple of specific examples. First one would be looking in the emerging markets. So what probably had a little bit more steam to it last year was around electrification. Even looking at like heavy duty trucks and those that are doing long haul trips. So there's a big push on that. There was federal funding that was supporting that as well to go and identify these locations. But always the question that we got back from our fleet operators was, are we able to actually use these trucks? Are the batteries going to be able to support the duration that we have? So we recently did a study with partnership with Terawatt and the Smart Freight Center, looking at the corridor from Los Angeles to El Paso. And so that's about 800 miles, a lot of traffic moving from LA to that length of it. And so what we found from the traffic insights that we had from altitude was that about 62% of the driving legs are under 200 miles for each trip. And then the other 82% of the driving legs are under 400 miles. So I think in the world today, battery electric vehicles for heavy trucks range from 150 to 250 miles. Some of them go all the way up to 500 miles. And so really just putting that into perspective of using mobility insights to help these charging infrastructure providers pinpoint where they should optimally place the infrastructure is really an emerging market that we're looking to support. And I think it'll have legs on it again the next couple of years. Now, on the underserved side, one of the biggest things that we've seen as an underserved market is just truck parking in general. We work with a lot of different state DOTs or real estate partners that want to understand where there's issues from capacity versus the demand. And so, not only looking at like rural areas, but also these large metro areas that have a lot of distribution centers, but there's next to no terminals or parking. And so, these trucks are floating around residential areas. And so helping them identify the areas as to where these trucks are parking, and then allow them to go and build kind of solutions and assets for them to utilize that to be kind of a profit center, but also help in general the truckers that are driving too. So it's been a really interesting one that we've been helping support recently as well.
This is really fascinating, the example you've given. And I would like us to go into the analyzing patterns. And the three of you talked about predicting patterns, behaviors, in order to be resilient. So analyzing patterns in commercial and industrial activity to determine ideal locations for new infrastructure. What would be your advice, your expertise on this one, Kevin?
Yeah, and so I know I did touch on this a little bit already, but I imagine a lot of you on this webinar are familiar with travel demand or travel behavior models. That's really a big part of what I do, what RSG does, in addition to market research. And so yeah, I highly recommend understanding and utilizing the tools that are available to us in our planning space. And so once again, really getting that high quality data, really understanding what's going on today, being able to actually look back a few years. We're actually on our third round of data collection in the Central Valley for one of my clients, and really understanding how those trends have changed. We were lucky enough to collect data just before COVID hit and shelter in place went into effect. We collected kind of right at the peak of Omicron in fall of 2001, or excuse me, 2021. And then we've actually collected post COVID. So really understanding how behavior has changed, where it's going, the trajectory, and then using all that information to really update our models and make sure that they represent the latest trends. And then we can utilize that information to then add in the projects that we anticipate coming along and see what those infrastructure needs are going to be. One of our really key findings was just the importance of redundancy. And I think it came up a little bit with Nate and and Alicia, that what happens when there is a disruption? in the network. And all of a sudden, supply chain can't get out. One of the sites that we were studying during COVID was actually Medline. Medline is one of the largest, private suppliers of medical supplies in the world. And so we were tasked with really ensuring that those supplies could make it out onto the network and get to the hospitals where they're needed. And so you can obviously apply that logic with a lot of other industries, but really starting to think about resiliency, redundancy, et cetera. And to be able to do that, having tools that are, trusted from the planning process to really help you identify where those issues are going to be, test alternatives. So we're actually able to go in and not have to go build it first, but we can actually test it in an
Yes.
environment, and then be able to then, basically make proactive decisions based off that and set timelines to it as well. So what do we need in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30
Yes.
years? Our travel models have the ability to do all that as long as we have good data to support their development.
This is best practice, Kevin, to always calibrate your data based on, as you said, COVID was a black swan. So calibrating those behaviors and the data you gathered there with post-COVID, post-black swan data in order to be reactive and be predictive. What's your expertise on this one, Alicia?
Yeah, so I think Kevin touched on a lot of great information and, in concepts here. We've heard about the concept of digital twins for a while, so I'm going to go back to, the IT portion of this. And so we've heard about the idea of digital twins for a while, but what makes things great in supply chain right now is the cost of doing that has gone way down, and the effort that it takes has also gone way down. So me as somebody that coming out, let's say I don't know anything about technology, there are now tools that allow me to build these models in next to no time without concentrated expertise. So I believe that once the data is ready or the company is ready to move, a lot of these tools can be utilized to start planning, to get digital twins, to access real-time information. And that could be from predictive maintenance on the plant floor all the way to, delivery delays. So just utilizing, the power of the cloud, IoT core, Kinesis for streaming, other types of tools to be able to put yourself on an infrastructure to analyze these different, calculations, models, what your overall company objective is really, the foundational layer for being able to make decisions and hopefully improve customer experience.
Exactly. So great data is there, ready to be onboarded on the digital twin, who is now predicting the models and best routes, optimizing routes, for example, in supply chain. Nate, what's your expertise on analyzing patterns in commercial and industrial activity to determine ideal location?
Yeah, so I have a couple I can talk through. The first one I think I mentioned before was the Francis Scott Key Bridge. It's like when there's a major event that occurs. So for those that don't remember, that was major container ship had hit the bridge in Baltimore, shut it down for a very long time. And so that was a major corridor for many fleet operators and supply chain operators that had to use that to get goods back and forth. So fleet operators today, many of them have their own kind of analytics from their fleet. They understand what they do, where they go, similar to that about like the Amazon delivery vehicles. But what they don't have a lot of visibility into is what the rest of the fleets are doing. And so through that kind of incident, we were able to provide what alternative routes were occurring, the travel time delays that happened, and basically allow the fleets to have insight into where they should move to be effectively get their deliveries done. And then also like what different trends happened at the ports. So that port was closed, and now we want to see the different volumes. So we're able to understand trip volumes and activity at the different ports across the East Coast is where those are taking kind of the offload from what Baltimore was having. So that's a very specific example of how we help many of the fleets kind of understand like, where should we go and basically kind of change our supply chain that we have set today. The next that really isn't like mobility, but it's more about just insights. So we work with a lot of large CRE providers that own a bunch of industrial logistics centers. And so they want to manage their portfolio as well and understand trends. Um, One came to us before to validate kind of our data, which was a good job. And they said, hey, go and do a study on this particular site. And so we basically looked at our trucking activity at that site and we saw month over month trend down, basically to where there's no activity. And we came back and said, hey, this looks like there's activity that's fizzling out here. And he goes back, yeah, well, that company is going bankrupt as well. So basically correlating and make sure kind of a gut check to see that it works. But in general, it could provide you visibility into things like tenant risk or opportunity to grow in markets that you might not be in as well. So it's just another fashion of mobility that we've seen
Mhm.
others kind of take advantage of.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you. We have a question. Thank you, our audience, for being so active. We have a question for you, Alicia. What could be the limitations of digital twins, and in which sector digital twins are best?
Sure. So technical limitations, I think we've already heard the term garbage in, garbage out, but really one of the largest limitations is the quality of the data and then the integration from legacy systems. So I think in the supply chain, we often know that companies have grown by acquisition and they might be on old, adequate, at dated systems that don't really talk to one another. So really that data side there and the real-time synchronization sometimes isn't real time. So those are the three type of technological challenges that are there. And I would also say data silos across departments and getting different departments to buy in. Does the finance team also see value in building this, digital twin? And then of course there's computational cost that would go in there. So depending on what type of system that you want to put in, how much you want to spend on it for the computation. As we know, AI is not inexpensive. Right now, we're kind of seeing a lot of investment in there. So everybody's saying, hey, try everything out, but it's not free. So going on year over year, what is your return on investment from the infrastructure that you've put in place? And then, of course, model accuracy to ensure what models that you're putting in place on your digital twins are in fact accurate and they are targeted towards the goals that you want to set. Sometimes we have a whole lot of data and we set these models, but we're not really feeding into the overall corporate objective. And lastly, I would say cybersecurity vulnerabilities. We've known about different attacks that have really startled the entire supply chain. And I would say, there's organizational limitations, maintenance life cycles, just making sure if you replace a piece of equipment that it's now back uploaded into your digital twin, and then practical limitations with the scalability. And for where I see it mostly, I'm sorry, this is long-winded, but in manufacturing. So that could be anything from, pharma or biosciences manufacturing to, auto manufacturing. So anything that's in that space. And then I would say also with aerospace, because generally these are very regulated, so the steps are, properly in place for you to create these systems and they're long asset times, right? You don't build a plane in a day, so you have a long time to build out these systems. And then lastly, in utilities and energy, because they are pretty continuous flow and they don't change again, right? So regulation keeps them pretty stable without a lot of changes.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you for your question. I think that's your lucky day. You have a full master class and free expertise in real time. Thank you, Alicia. Time flies, so I would like us to go into the third topic, incorporating mobility insights into your site selection and supply chain planning. Kevin, what's your expertise on this?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I've been helping a large logistics developer in the Central Valley of California, and site selection has been a big aspect of the work that we've done. And so, once again, really utilizing data to understand their potential tenants' needs. That nowadays it's really largely built to suit that the days of just building an empty warehouse, for instance, or logistics hubs is kind of out the window. That still does occur, but usually you have in mind, who you're serving. There's so many different types of facilities in the supply chain now. And so really utilizing that data to, once again, understand those needs so that you can site it with good access to the infrastructure that you need, understanding congestion patterns, making sure that they're actually going to be able to make it onto the roadway. Where's your labor going to come from? Is the basically labor pool in line with the type of labor that you're going to need at your facility. And so these are all things that can be obtained through, market research, through travel demand
Mm-hmm.
modeling, through understanding and basically utilization of travel behavior models that integrate a lot of different aspects on both the supply side and the demand side of travel. And so that's one area that I've really been focusing is, yeah, really helping them understand. And through one of these, digital twins, as we're calling them here, we
Mhm.
can really ensure and kind of test these. And so some exercises I've done for my client is, what if you put the building here and it's this tenant? This is what
Mm-hmm.
traditionally their patterns have been. This is what the access looks like. Here's where they're going to hit congestion. Here's where you might need redundant access. What if we put it down here? What does that look like? In California, one hot topic with the passing of SB 743 is VMT. How does that affect VMT? Are you going to have circuitous routing because of that? Is there a better location where we could have
Mm-hmm.
lower VMT, reduce air quality impacts, and also reduce, quite frankly, your costs, because time and distance is money when it comes to freight. And so we can utilize these models to really understand what the most optimal pathing is and siting for these locations is.
And testing scenario for with all these models is crucial, especially having a transparent collaboration with your client and making sure that yes, we have these predictive models and behaviors, but let's do some test scenario. I think this is super important. Alicia, incorporating mobility insights into your site selection and supply chain planning. How do you do that?
Yeah, so I encourage a lot of data input from third-party sources. So traffic patterns, seasonal labor market, and the workforce mobility. How easy is it for people to get to work? Their public transportation, that sort of thing. What's the proximity to other types of travel, rail, cars specifically? Well, 70 where I'm located, 75 has within one day of where I'm located, 75% of the uh, US can be served within one day from here. So it's very active in rail and airports and highways. So just looking at the overall pattern of where exchanges can happen and where layovers can happen, and environmental factors, those could be regulations, they could be, just overall air quality and sustainability requirements, and then really real estate costs versus operational gains. I'll just give an example. So generally, Ohio has been seen as kind of a flyover state. Real estate has been pretty easy to get at a low cost per square foot type of deal. But because of that, it's been very attractive for NVIDIA, Meta to build AI data centers. So the cost of real estate has kind of skyrocketed, where before you might have said, yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer. You might start working elsewhere because other developments are coming in and increasing the price per square foot. And that also is increasing energy. So looking at current data is great, but you also have to look at what will happen in the future.
Yes. The best way to predict the future is looking into the past. Somebody said it. Nate, what's your experience with incorporating mobility insights into your site selection?
Yeah, so I'm definitely on the opposite side of somebody like Kevin Johnson, who has a ton of experience in modeling and forecasting and pulling everything together. Definitely on the more the side of the input of the data into those types of models. But what I've seen through the lens of a lot of consultants working with our data for different types of customers is that they'll look at, well, micro level kind of mobility insights and also national level too. And so a good micro would be looking at just like port activity today because of the tariffs that are kind of ongoing. And so understanding things like the trends of volumes from last year versus this year, month over month. So we've built a whole kind of tariff tracker that looks at 4 seaports across the West Coast to see if there's been any dips in that. And so we can see things like, LA and Long Beach has remained relatively the same, a little bit of a dip, month over month looks like the same correlation, but the Port of Oakland has seen like drops in about 40% of their volume in certain months of that year too. So when you're looking at the past, can that inform some of those decisions and inputs into the
Mm-hmm.
models? And then also looking at things like, the trucks that leave the port, where are they going next? If you're a big real estate company and you understand where should I place my optimal location, which routes are they using, and what are the journey ETAs? the number of trips that are taken in order to make that best decision to service your customers as well. So on the national level, we work with a lot of like C-store operators or truck travel centers who go and procure 20 to 30 different sites a year to serve kind of fleets or passengers in general. And so be able to understand traffic flows and change and trends that happen in like the VMT by county levels, and really so that they can make their best informed decision, because it does get tighter and tighter. Like there's just less restriction in terms of the real estate available. So using mobility to help have those endpoints instead of just kind of gut instinct. So it's really cool to see multiple facets of how people are using it today.
This is exciting, Nate, and thank you for bringing on real life examples. We have another question from Muzair. As we know, sustainability is one of the primary elements nowadays. How can good movements in sites improve both efficiency and sustainability? Can you give an example of an organization or a company, Kevin?
Yeah, I'd be happy to go first. And so I haven't named them yet, but one of my clients in the Central Valley is Prologis. So Prologis is one of, if not the largest, warehousing developer in the world. And so they are really, really focused on, efficiency and sustainability. And so it was really a great opportunity to get to work with them and learn so much about their business and the needs of their tenants. And so, first regarding efficiency, as I talked about, they really want to ensure that their logistics parks are sustainable moving into the future. That the last thing you want to have happen is to go out and invest a lot of money, build all these new warehouses or infrastructure, and then it turns out that this actually isn't a viable site, whether it's because of congestion, lack of access, lack of a labor pool. And so these are all the things that we're looking at for them. So what infrastructure is needed over the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years to ensure that the site is sustainable and that these tenants will actually remain in their locations, and that what will happen is that this just doesn't become abandoned and then you have to go redo it somewhere else with the huge material cost and, quite frankly, big impacts on the environment. So just in terms of that sustainability, it's really just looking at these sites and really how to make sure their long-term viability in terms of a lot of aspects that I mentioned earlier in that interactive wheel. Those are all the aspects that you really need to look at. And, some of those aren't in my wheelhouse, but, a lot of them are. And, once again, understanding demographics is extremely important. Your labor pool, what can you provide them to make it so that they actually want to come to work? Understanding where they live, how they access the site, what travel demand management measures might be beneficial to them. We actually were looking at light rail opportunities to ensure that they can actually get there when the freeways become more congested. I mentioned earlier too, redundancy in terms of access for freight to the freeway system, which is also how labor accesses the sites. And so really looking at that. And then, Nate touched on electrification. I'm doing a lot of electrification work for them as well. Yeah, understanding where their trucks are going, what those distances are. As Nate said, right now it's about 250 to 300 miles ish is the rough range of an electric battery for a truck. Where does that get you? Where do you need other charging infrastructure? Can that satisfy 60, 80% of your trips? What about that other 20%? What can you do? So those are all things that we're looking at using mobility data analytics. And, just once again, having that understanding that we have today that, quite frankly, even 5 years ago, we really didn't have, and certainly we didn't have the confidence in the data that we do now. I've always looked at this as, very much an emerging market. What I tell a lot of my clients is, travel behavior modeling in some form has been around since I think the 60s. And, mobility data is, in my opinion, really in its infancy. And I've just seen it grow exponentially, even just over the last 5 years. Access to telematics-based data was a huge game changer for what we're doing. And, I'm just really excited to see where it's going with AI and just keep increasing our confidence in the data and understanding of these patterns so we can improve our tools.
Thank you, Kevin. And I think our producer has the next topic for a new talk show on sustainability and data. I remember my times in supply chain when we worked very closely. It was a consumer packed goods company, and we were working very closely with clients and customers in order to make sure that we achieve sustainability as well, not only product on the shelf with Zaire, but also how can we bring and make the product availability as well as achieving sustainability. And there were beautiful work, like 1 year roadmap together transparently built with the customer, and there were like improvements, switching from road tracks to rail transport where possible, making sure that we don't deliver partial pallets and only full pallets. So lots of actions to drive availability, supply chain, but also sustainability. That's a beautiful winning question, I would say. So you've just won the Supply Chain Talk mug, which will be couriered to you, Zair. Congratulations. Because time flies so quickly, I would like to invite you, Alicia, Nate, and Kevin, to express a closing thought and an action item for our audience to take away. Alicia.
Yeah, so my closing thought is focus on the data to best achieve what you want to achieve with your overall goals, right? The data is imperative. So my action item would be what is your main objective for your role right now? Figure out which data sources that you are pulling from and ensure that they are accurate and review them for any changes that might be needed in input or output.
This is beautiful, Alicia. Thank you. Nate.
Yeah, I would say similar to Alicia is, jump kind of like both feet into the water on AI, but do it with a sense of initial caution in the sense of the answers that you get back. Take a look at like what the decision you would make before using AI and then go use AI to kind of help make that decision and see how they correlate or if they don't, and identify any gaps that happen. And if there are gaps, relay those back to the vendor that you're working with so that they can go and improve kind of those models and those agents as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. So don't do AI just for the sake of AI. Make sure that you do a proper assessment first. Why you need AI? I love it. Kevin, your closing thought and action item.
Yeah, so Alicia and Nate touched on a little bit of what I was going to say, but I'll just say that I think for me, the way I like to sum it up to my clients is ask the tough questions. That I know, Nate, that's an approach I've taken with you. You just kind of mentioned, work with your vendors, understand their data. That all data sources have strengths and limitations. Even the most basic thing in my industry is going out and put a tube counter down and collecting counts. That's pretty basic, but there are limitations to that approach, and so really understanding those is incredibly important. So I just encourage everyone to just increase your understanding and ask those tough questions, and don't be afraid to ask them. You don't understand something. We had some really great questions in the chat today, and yeah, just keep doing that, and I think we'll all improve because of that. And you'll get people like me to think more about what your issues are, and then obviously going back to data vendors and users of the data as well, get them understanding what people's thoughts and needs are. And yeah, let's all build that confidence together.
Thank you, Kevin. And the three of you, the closing thought and the action item is related to leadership. Ask the right question and test. Why do we need this in the first place? Challenge, test scenario, proactive mindset, and don't be afraid to have hard conversations, because it's data drives sustainability, data drives efficiency, where data is serving the right purpose. Thank you. I would love to have you on my show in the future. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Kevin. For our audience, I would like you to dial in our next talk show next Wednesday. My colleague, Alistair Chartan, will host a beautiful talk show on smart supply chain optimization, turning trade-offs into payoffs. So don't miss it. Thank you, everyone, and display strong leadership. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.